It was May of 1968 near the Laotian border, deep in the western highlands of Vietnam. The kind of place maps lie about. Green everywhere. No straight lines, no safe ground. I was an infantry sergeant then, 22 years old, too young to know when orders were wrong. Old enough to follow them anyway. We were inserted before sunrise. No markings, no unit names, just 6 of us and one major who did not sleep. The helicopter left fast, like it wanted distance. When the sound faded, the jungle closed in and stayed that way. We moved uphill for hours. Slow, quiet, wet to the bone. The trail we chose narrowed into a stone saddle, a perfect place to stop someone. Too perfect. Even then, that bothered me. We set the trap by hand. Mines placed careful. Fields checked twice. No talking. The major watched the trees, not us. By late afternoon, the jungle felt wrong. Not loud, not silent, just waiting. That was when something started walking toward us. Right down the trail we owned. Before we start the video, hit the subscribe button to support the channel. The thing on the trail did not rush us. It did not sneak either. It walked the way a man walks when he knows the ground belongs to him. That alone told me this was not a normal mission. No matter what, we had been briefed. 3 days earlier, we had been pulled from different units and told to pack light. No letters, no patches, no names on gear. We met at a small strip that did not show up on any map I later saw. The major was already there, clean uniform, calm eyes. He spoke plain and slow. Said we were going after a courier moving sensitive material between border zones. Said the trail was used only at certain hours. Said speed and silence mattered more than contact. Nothing about aliens, nothing strange, but some details did not fit. He told us not to fire unless ordered. That was the first crack. On paper, I was in charge of the team once boots hit dirt. I had 5 men, good soldiers, quiet, tied in the right way. Each had already seen enough war to know when to keep questions to themselves. The major came with 2 men who did not wear rank and did not carry rifles like infantry. Their packs were heavier than they should have been. They watched us more than the jungle. I told myself they were intelligence. That was easier than digging deeper. Once we were on the ground, the land took over. Thick mud sucked at our boots. Leeches found skin no matter how tight we wrapped. The air felt heavy, like it pressed down on your chest. We moved uphill, slow and careful, using the trees and rock to stay hidden. No enemy signs, no villages, just whole tracks that faded and returned like they were unsure where they wanted to go. The saddle was exactly where the major said it would be. A narrow cut between 2 rock faces with a steep drop on one side and thick growth on the other. Anyone walking through would have to slow down. Anyone caught there would have no good cover. We laid our minds low and checked angles again and again. Every man knew his sector. We were sent for a clean snatch. In and out. That is what I told them. While we worked, I noticed things in my pack I did not remember packing. Small foil packets, smooth and cold. A thin line on a spool that felt stronger than wire but lighter than string. I asked the major about it. He said only to keep it dry. His voice was steady, but his eyes never stopped scanning the trees. I let it go. You learn fast in war when not to press. Time stretched once we were in position. The jungle does that. It makes minutes feel like hours, then steals hours without warning. We took turns watching the trail. The light shifted, shadows grew long. No birds came near the saddle. That stood out. Even in quiet places, something usually moves. One of my men, the youngest, pointed out tracks in the mud near the trail edge. They were not boots, not bare feet either, narrow at the back, long at the front, like the foot leaned forward too much. I told him to stop staring at them. The mind plays tricks when you wait too long. Still, I marked the spot in my head. As afternoon wore on, the feeling of being watched grew stronger. Not the normal kind. No sense of eyes behind leaves, more like the ground itself was aware of us. The major shifted position twice without saying why. The 2 handlers checked their packs and watches more often than they checked the trail. Then the waiting ended. A shape appeared at the far end of the saddle. At first, it looked like a man upright, 2 arms, 2 legs, but the way it moved felt wrong, too smooth, too measured. Each step landed exactly where it should, avoiding loose stone and soft mud like it knew the ground better than we did. It carried no rifle, no pack, just a long object wrapped in dark cloth held close to the body. No one fired. No one breathed loud. We had rehearsed this moment, but not like this. The thing stopped just short of the first mine and turned its head slightly, not enough to see its face, just enough to show it was aware of us. That was when I knew the courier story was a lie and that whatever we were about to meet had been expected long before we ever stepped into that jungle. The thing on the trail stayed still for a long moment, not frozen like it was scared, more like it was letting time pass on purpose. I studied it through leaves and mud, trying to line up details the way I always did with enemy troops. Height a little taller than average. Limbs too thin, shoulders narrow but held square. The cloth-wrapped object rested against its side, not carried like a weapon, but not treated casually either. I waited for a signal from the major. None came. That silence pressed harder than any command. My men were tense, but controlled. I could feel it in the way they shifted weight and slowed their breathing. One of them had a clear shot at the chest. Another covered the trail behind it. Everything was set for a normal snatch, but nothing about this felt normal anymore. The jungle stayed unnaturally still. Even the air felt thick like before a storm that never breaks. The thing took another step forward, a careful step. It placed its foot inches from where a mine lay buried. No wire pulled, no click, just a soft press into the mud. I felt the strange warmth through my glove where I rested my hand on the ground. I lifted it and wiped mud on my pants without thinking. The major shifted again and raised one finger. Hold. That was all. I glanced back at the two handlers. They were no longer pretending to be observers. One had opened his pack just enough for me to see metal tools I had never seen before. The other held the thin line spool in his hands, feeding out inches at a time, testing it like a man checking fishing line. They were calm in a way that did not belong in an ambush. Dad told me they had done this before or believed they had control over what was coming. The thing tilted its head slightly. I could not see its eyes clearly, but I felt the attention land on us. Not searching, not guessing, knowing. The sense of being hidden slipped away. It was like the leaves and shadows had lost their meaning. I tightened my grip on my rifle and felt a deep urge to fire just to break the moment. Training kept my finger still. A faint sound carried through the saddle. Not a voice, not an animal, more like a soft clicking, slow and steady. It seemed to come from the thing itself, but also from the rocks around us, as if the sound was bouncing before it even left the source. One of my men swallowed hard. Another whispered my name without turning his head. I told him to stay focused. My voice sounded flat, even to me. The major finally spoke, barely above breath. He said the word, wait, nothing else. That was when I understood our role more clearly. We were not hunters. We were the fence. Whatever this was, it had been guided here, and we were placed to close the gate behind it. The thing stepped fully into the saddle, into the heart of our trap. It did not rush. It did not hesitate. The wrapped object brushed against its leg as it moved. I noticed the cloth was stained dark in places, not with mud, but with something older, dry. The shape beneath was straight and smooth with no hard edges showing. As it reached the center, it stopped again, slowly. It turned its head enough for me to see its face through a gap in the leaves. The skin was pale, but not sickly. The eyes were too dark, too wide, set just slightly wrong. The mouth was thin and still. No breath showed. No sweat. It looked almost human in the way a statue looks human. Close enough to fool you until you stare too long. For a brief moment, it looked directly at my position. Not past me, not around me, at me. I felt something tighten in my chest, like a hand closing around the heart. The feeling passed just as fast, leaving behind a cold focus. Behind it, far off beyond the saddle, something else moved in the trees. Branches bent without wind, a shape passed between trunks too large and too smooth. The thing on the trail seemed to sense it, too. Its head turned slightly in that direction and the clicking sound paused. That was when I realized we were not the only ones waiting and that whatever was coming next would not care about orders or plans. The moment stretched longer than it should have. The thing stood in the center of the saddle inside every line of fire, yet none of us moved. My legs cramped from holding position. Sweat ran down my back despite the cooling air. I kept my eyes moving between the thing and the tree line behind it, where that other movement had passed. I had learned in combat that danger rarely comes from where you expect, and this felt like standing between two storms that had not decided which way to break. The major finally gave a signal, not with words, but with a slow motion of his hand. The handlers rose just enough to act. One of them stepped forward, careful and steady, as if approaching a wild animal that had already agreed not to bolt. He unspooled the thin line in a smooth throat. It cut through the air and seemed to catch on nothing. Yet, it stopped hard and wrapped around the thing's arms and chest. The line pulled tight with a sound like strained wire, though it did not look like wire at all. The thing reacted, but not the way a man would. It did not fight. It did not panic. Its body stiffened, and the clicking sound returned faster now. The air around it looked wrong, like heat shimmer, though the day was cooling. The cloth-wrapped object slipped from its grip and rested against the ground without a sound. The handler holding the line braced himself, feet dug into the mud, teeth clenched. For a moment, it seemed like the plan was working. That was when the jungle answered. From the trees beyond the saddle came sharp movement. Not shouting, not footsteps, just sudden force. Branches snapped. Leaves tore free. A shape moved low and fast. Too fast for clear sight. Then came gunfire from the far side. Short bursts that were not ours. Nor the Vietnamese troops drawn by noise or by chance. It did not matter. They pushed in from the slope, firing blind, shouting to one another. Bullets snapped through leaves and chipstone. The quiet control of the moment shattered. The major shouted orders then. Fire at the tree. Do not hit the target. His voice held, but I heard strain under it. I passed the word down the line. My men opened up in controlled bursts, rifles bucking, brass flying into the mud. We aimed high where the movement had been. The return fire from the enemy was scattered, nervous. They had seen something, too. And it was not us that scared them most. I tracked a shape through my sights that was not human. It moved between trees without slowing, bending branches out of the way like they were grass. An NBA soldier ran into its path and vanished from sight. Pulled sideways with a sound like cloth tearing, another fell without a mark on him, eyes wide, weapons still clutched. I forced myself to keep firing where ordered, even as every instinct told me the rules had changed. Behind us, the thing in the saddle shifted. The line strained and hummed. The handler holding it cried out as his boot slid in the mud. The other handler rushed forward with one of the foil packets, tearing it open and throwing the contents toward the thing. A sharp smell filled the air like hot metal after rain. The shimmer around the thing pulsed once, then faded. For a breath, everything seemed to slow. That breath ended when the ground shook. Not from artillery, not from mines. It felt deeper, like pressure pushing up from below. One of our barrage charges went off without command. Then another, not in sequence, but scattered. Dirt and rock exploded upward. I was thrown hard against the slope, my rifle torn from my hands. Pain flared in my thigh, hot and sharp, then dulled into a heavy ache. I rolled instinctively, training taking over, and dragged myself behind what cover I could find. Smoke filled the saddle. Men shouted for each other. Someone screamed once, then went quiet. Through the haze, I saw the thing standing upright, untouched by the blasts. The line lay slack and broken at its feet. The handlers were down, one not moving, the other crawling away with blood on his face. The wrapped object was back in the thing's hand, the cloth now fully fallen away to reveal a smooth shaft that caught the dim light without reflecting it. Enemy fire increased, wild and desperate. My men were still alive, still fighting, but the shape in the trees closed in, and the thing in the saddle began to walk forward again, not toward escape, toward us. Each step pressed the mud down like weight from above, leaving prints too deep for its size. I found my rifle and forced myself to my knees, ignoring the pain. I was out of plans, out of trust. All that mattered was keeping my men breathing through the next minute. I raised my weapon, sighted through smoke and fear, and waited for an order that might never come, knowing the next moments would decide which threat reached us first. The saddle had turned into chaos, but it was not the kind I understood. In a normal fight, noise and movement follow rules. Here, those rules were gone. Smoke drifted low, thick, and uneven, as if it chose where to hang. The jungle edge flashed with brief movement that never stayed long enough to aim at. I crawled toward my nearest man, dragging my bad leg through mud that felt warm under my palm. He was alive, shaken, eyes wide, still firing short bursts where I pointed. I squeezed his shoulder once to keep him steady, then pushed myself back toward my sector. The thing kept coming. It did not rush, even as rounds snapped past it. Bullets struck the ground near its feet and vanished into the mud without splash. One round hit its shoulder and flattened, dropping straight down like it had struck stone. That broke something in me. I had faced men who did not fear death. But this was different. This was something that did not respect it. Behind us, the jungle erupted again. The other presence moved closer now, no longer careful. Trees bent and cracked, shapes started through brush too fast to track. The enemy soldiers caught between us and it broke formation. Some running, some freezing where they stood. One man screamed for his mother before he was pulled backward into the leaves. The sound cut off sharp like a switch flipped. My stomach clenched, but my hands kept working. Reload. Aim. Fire. Count rounds. Do not waste them. The major shouted for smoke, not for cover. For signal. That made no sense, but I obeyed. I pulled a grenade and tossed it low. White smoke bloomed and spread, mixing with the darker blast smoke already there. Through it, I saw the handlers move again. One of them, bleeding badly, crawled toward the thing with a syringe in hand. He shouted words I could not hear. The thing stopped walking and looked down at him, not with anger, with focus. The syringe never reached its target. The ground near the handler folded inward like a sudden sink, and he vanished waist-deep in mud that should not have moved. He screamed as he was pulled under, hands clawing at the surface. Then he was gone. The thing turned its head toward the jungle, toward whatever had done that. The clicking sound rose again, faster, sharper. The air around it rippled. For the first time, it raised the smooth shaft in its hand. It pointed it toward the tree line where the unseen presence had last moved. The air bent along that line like a clear wall pushed sideways. Trees leaned inward. Leaves flew toward a point and vanished. A deep sound rolled through the ground, felt more than heard. Then suddenly, the pressure eased. The jungle snapped back into place with a rush of sound and movement. In that brief calm, I heard the helicopter before I saw it. Late, too late, the sound came uneven, like the pilot was fighting the air itself. The major's voice came through again, shouting for us to pull back, to grab who we could, and move down slope. No mention of the thing. No mention of the handlers. Just get out, I shouted for my men and started moving. Half running, half dragging myself through pain and mud. 2 were wounded but mobile. 1 did not answer. I saw him near the rocks. Still, eyes open, chest unmoving. There was no time. That knowledge hurt more than my leg. As we pulled away, I looked back once. The thing stood alone in the saddle now. Smoke drifted around it. Enemy fire had stopped. The jungle was still again, but not in the waiting way from before. This was exhaustion. The thing watched us leave. It did not follow. It lowered the shaft and turned its head slightly as if listening to something far away. The helicopter dropped lower through the smoke, rotors chopping leaves. We threw smoke again and waved with what strength we had left. As the bird touched down, I felt the ground tremble once more, distant this time. I did not know if it was the other presence moving away or something worse deciding to stay. As we lifted off, I kept my eyes on the saddle until trees swallowed it whole, knowing whatever truth waited there would follow us long after the jungle was gone. We did not go straight to a normal base. The helicopter flew low and far, crossing ridges until the land flattened, and lights appeared where none should have been. We landed on the strip, cut into the jungle, marked only by dim lamps and men who did not wear unit signs. Medics pulled us off fast. They did not ask names. They did not ask what happened. They worked with calm hands and quiet voices like this was expected. They treated my leg without showing me what they used. A shot burnt cold going in, then the pain eased too fast to feel right. While they worked, an officer I had never seen sat nearby and listened. He did not write notes. He finished my sentences for me when I spoke. That scared me more than the jungle had. When I asked about the major, he said the major had other responsibilities. When I asked about the handlers, he said they were reassigned. That was the word he used. Reassigned, not wounded, not killed. Later they separated us one by one, no talking, no eye contact. I sat alone in a small room with a table and a chair bolted to the floor. The light hummed softly. The officer returned now with another man who wore civilian clothes and no rank at all. They asked me to describe the mission from the beginning. I did every step, every order. When I reached the part about the thing on the trail, they stopped me and corrected a detail. They told me the exact time it entered the saddle. I had not told them that yet. They explained the mission then, or at least a version of it. They said the courier story was a cover, even for us. They said the target was non-human, but intelligent and had been observed moving through certain border areas on a repeating schedule. They said it responded to traps built with specific patterns and signals. They